Hello everyone, welcome to another Inkarnate live stream. Hey, today we're going to be doing the top 10 battle map fails. That's going to be pretty much the 10 most common mistakes or errors that users make when making a battle map with the Fantasy Battlemap style. Alright, so let's not wasting time, let's just hop in. We're going to start with 10 going to 1 in no particular order of importance. The first one is going to be not using the grid. I can't tell you how important it is to absolutely use the grid, especially when you're starting out putting together your battle map, because it's going to be helpful for several things. One, it's going to help you to kind of understand the scale of the stamps you're using. So if that space right there is equal to 5 square feet, you're going to notice that it will help to realize what scale your other stamps are. Like, is this chair too big or too small? Things like that. So the grid helpful, not also that, but it's going to be helpful for lining up things like staircases, the doors, lining up your walls to make sure that they're not in the middle of a grid space. Maybe you want your player to jump out a window. At least it'll be lined up with the grid so they can jump right out, and there's no confusion on what space they have to be on to carry out this particular action. So using the grid, extremely helpful. If you don't start with the grid right away, you'll end up having to probably go back and rescale stamps and maneuver stamps around. Save that headache and set the grid first before you start putting together your map, okay? Let's go with number 9. That's going to be a lack of light and shadow. I mean, light and shadow can be confusing for some people, especially if you're new to the tool. But the secret is to practice or to start with stamps that already have a built-in light source into it, like that fireplace. You'll see that there is some candles on top of this shelf right here. There's also windows. Depending on where your light source is outside, you could have light also emanating out your windows. Okay, so it's a great place to start. Let's go ahead and just do that real quick, like putting down a light source. You can see what that looks like. Light sources are easy to find. Open up the catalog, type in light into that search field, press enter, and the light should pop up. And I'm going to go ahead and just choose this one right here. I'm going to put it on layer 5 so that the light is going to come into contact with every stamp. Just put it right over it like that. And then you can do the same thing here, zoom in and put some light sources just right on top of that. So that way you have some glow. Now, once you have a light source, then you kind of know where your shadows are going to be. So you would probably want to use like an object shadow to show that this chair right here has a shadow emanating away from that. And there are multiple ways to take shadows. You can use the object shadow, you could use the path tool, or you could paint it with just using a black color and just drop the opacity. So it's up to you which way you want to carry about doing that. But once you've established the light source, then you can establish the directional shadow in which the light is casting. Okay, so light and shadow, super important. Notice that big difference when I've already added light. And you can add additional light sources if you want to as well. Get a big one in, so that way this thing is lighting up that whole region of the room. It's up to you how much lighting you want to put in. Let's go ahead and jump over to the next one. Number 8, flat stamps. This is one I see that's super common. When you look at a map and everything seems kind of flat, it's because it's missing something. It's missing what we call ambient occlusion or a drop shadow. And that shadow uses contrast to make things pop out. So if I go ahead and open up the house and I select all the walls, I can go ahead and select a shadow that I want, object or layer. I'm going to choose layer so that the shadows don't overlap each other. And then you can adjust the layer right here. And I've just made sure that the offsets are both at 0. And I made a harsh, made the intensity kind of high and the shadow blur kind of wide. And you'll notice a huge difference. It already shows it's kind of popping out a little bit. Watch what happens when I turn off that. See, flat, not flat. So using object and the layer shadows, super helpful to making things pop out. I'm going to do the same thing with probably some of the interior stuff as well, so that it looks like they're also popping out. And I'll use an object shadow for that. So you can kind of see already that the stamps pop out a little bit more, creating a little bit of contrast, ambient occlusion. Okay, now there are other things that you can do to also show stamps not being flat, to look like they're layered on top of each other, and that is you can change the brightness of stamps that are underneath or on top of something. Because the table is higher up than those stools that I have selected there, I can go to Advanced Settings and drop the brightness down a little bit to make them a little bit darker, and that contrast, that dark against that light, will cause the table to look like it's higher up because the stamps below it or underneath it are a little bit darker. It's Advanced Settings, then go to Brightness. Just make sure the layering is correct. Okay, let's go up to the next one. Let's do number 7. Kind of related to the last one, but this one is going to be layering inconsistencies. Everyone makes this mistake, not just new users, and it happens a lot especially when you have a lot of stamps on the canvas. Sometimes you lose track of the layer that's something on, and so you might, for instance, accidentally notice that one of the stools that you have by the table is on top when it should be underneath. So just peruse around the map and look for these kind of layering issues. They're not hard to fix, just select it and then move it. So I'll go in real quick, go to the interior, I'm going to select this stool and push it down a layer. So this happens a lot. Just keep track of what you're doing. It happens a lot too when you're using the density brush. It happens a lot when you're placing a lot of the same stamp. You sometimes forget what layers are on. Don't worry about perfectly getting layers right at first. Just do a final pass when you finish your map, and in that way you can make sure that everything is on the proper layer. This happens all the time to everyone, the best of us. Let's go up with number 6, stamp scale inconsistency. This one is a really easy mistake. It happens all the time. It's just that sometimes you might scale something up a little bit, and then the next stamp you select, the scale is the same as the last stamp selected. So for instance, this chair is so much bigger than this chair. Down here, you'll see the difference in these chair sizes. Just when you're finished with your map, just be sure that you look at things and make sure they're the right scale, the right size. Just select the chair and make sure it's at the same scale. The one thing to do to kind of make sure that you don't have this problem is to set the scale right away on the size. Most of the stamps that I have within here are at around 65, 66. Then have them around that same number for all your other stamps. This is not a set in stone rule. You can go 5 or 10 positive or negative in either direction with the scale that you want, but try not to deviate too far off from the original scale size that you're setting, because then the line art might get thicker, it might get thinner, and it looks a little odd. So just make sure that there's a relatively the same scale, so that way you don't have those kind of problems. So I'll go in, open up the interior, and scale this down to, it's set to 96, I'll set it to 66 because I think the majority of them are about set to that scale. That's about right. Let's select this one. That's 64, 66. See, it's off by a couple, but it's close enough, right? And that's okay. It's all right to do that. All right, let's keep going. Let's go with number 5. That's going to be texture scale inconsistency. This is an easy mistake to make, but just like with your stamps, sometimes your textures can be too big or too small depending on the scale. Whenever you drop the scale of a stamp, then you should also drop down the scale of the texture as well. Notice that these two rooms, there's a pantry right here, and then there's a bedroom. Notice that the scale is off on one of them. Okay, since I scaled the stamps down to 66, then it makes sense that the texture that I'm going to be using in there should probably be relatively the same size. So I set to FG layer, and then I can go in and just kind of paint in like this, and you'll kind of see that the scale is smaller, right? So making sure that when you set the scale for the stamps, be sure to also set the scale for the textures, because it can look really weird when you have these massive floorboards and yet these really small books, tables, whatever. So always setting scale for textures as well as stamps is going to help you on the way. Let's go with number 4. That's going to be no texture blending. Texture blending may seem like, well, I'm not a Picasso, I'm not a Michelangelo or a great artist or anything, you're not sure how to do that, it's not complex. It doesn't require a lot of skills. It's just all about just taking the two textures that you want and then dropping the opacity a little bit. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. If you look at the stone texture on the outside, it doesn't seem like it's blending very well in with that grass texture that I have. What happens if I want just patches of that stone walkway while having some of it being look like just some overgrown grass on it? So then I would pick the grass texture of my choice. You would drop the opacity. I usually go around in between 30 and 40, but you can do whatever you want. I'll just do 36. Have the softness all the way up. That's important. Okay? Make sure it's set to the right layer. And I'm just going to go in and just kind of maybe remove a section, maybe lighten some edges. A great place to kind of remove portions of it is like at a T section. Maybe right here would be good. Get more of the edges too, so they kind of blend in better. It's going to be kind of a multiple strokes that you're going to do, multiple clicks with your mouse or pen or whatever you're using. And this will be really helpful. And this way it'll kind of look like, yes, there we go. Now the road doesn't look so just bland. It's just sticking out there. And then you can do the same. You can take that road texture and make it really small and just throw some random stones out. Put it all the way up to around 70. And then just put some random kind of stones around here, going around it. Right? It's all about just taking one of the textures and with a light brush, just go in and kind of just scatter it around with small dots, multiple strokes, okay? Because that's what's going to cause blending, is just dropping the opacity, have the softness up, and then just go in with both textures and kind of soften up the edges, the transition between the two textures. That's really the trick. So do your texture blending. There's another trick for texture blending that I recommend that's really nice. Is there's some great textures called alpha textures, and these work great for blending because they have an alpha, meaning they support transparency. So if I type in like dry grass, there's this great dry grass texture. And remember the rule, we drop the size down a little bit. And this works great if you want to show like maybe some busyness moving around on the map. So it'll show some nice dirt in around here, so that way it looks like there's been some action. Someone's brought in some dirt. Same thing on the outside. Maybe I want to put some dirt on there. And you'll notice that there's a transparency. There's a little bit of nothing besides that dry grass. So you can throw that in. These alpha textures are perfect for blending. So definitely, if you see them, use them. They're very, really nice. So absolutely do that. Let's go with number 3. That's going to be repetitive stamp angles. This one I see all the time. And what it is most stamps will be at 0 degrees. And what you want to do is to make sure that a lot of the stamps are not at the exact same angle. When you have them all at the same angle, it looks kind of odd. So don't be afraid to just grab a stamp, rotate it a little bit. And when you start rotating stamps, making it look like there's been some kind of action going on, then things start to come to life. Like maybe someone accidentally bumped into the table and nudged it a little bit. Maybe the stool is far out over here, right? Notice that all the stools, the grain of the wood is all facing the same way. So select and rotate these stamps to make sure the grain is not all facing the exact same way. So rotate, rotate, rotate. Absolutely rotate your stamps randomly to kind of give them a little bit more interesting feel to it, like there's been some action going on, because things aren't all perfectly symmetrical and lined up. People bump into things, they drop things, there can be a mess. It shows use and it makes it look more interesting, right? So definitely be sure to rotate your stamps just a little bit to give that a little bit of wear and tear kind of feel. Look carefully over here. All of these logs right here are perfectly straight. That just seems so weird. So you, of course, would want to go in and maybe just rotate a couple to kind of give that a nicer kind of feel to it. And also, I noticed I forgot to give the trees a little bit of shadow as well. So let's go ahead and select all and give those a shadow as well. We'll go with Object, we go. Awesome. Just notice shadows, they do a lot. They really, really make things pop out. Let's go with number 2. It's going to be no filters. It's perfect. It's absolutely a personal choice to not use filters. That's totally understandable. But using filters can be very, very helpful for multiple things. It can set the mood. It could set the season. It could change it into an entirely different map. Let's say that you wanted this to be like a Fae-like setting. You go to HSBC filters and you can change the hue to whatever you want to give it a greenish feel. Maybe you want it to be greenish blue. Maybe you want it to be purple. Boom, there's your Fae map. All you did was just add one filter, change the hue, that's the colors that are on the map. Boom, there's your Fae map, right? Not complex. Maybe you want to have it be printer friendly. You want to print this out. Use a black and white HSBC filter. If you feel it's still too gray, boost up the brightness a little bit. Maybe bring the contrast down a little bit, okay? So you can use the filters to help you out with whatever things that you want. Maybe you want it to be more monochromatic. Maybe you want it to have even more color. Add a clarity filter on top of it. Maybe you want more cohesion between the stamps. Add a color filter on top of it. Cool, warm. It'll give it kind of a purplish feel to it. And it will cause the stamps to kind of blend together better because there's a filter that's adding this purplish hue. It's warm and cool feeling, causing all the stamps to kind of work together. So filters are extremely helpful. They have many, many uses. I recommend that you explore and play with them to see what kind of combination works best for what you're aiming for. The last one is not adding details. And details may seem like, well, I don't know what to add for details. This one's not complex. I recommend that you just go into each room or each section of the map and look at certain points of interest on the map that you would think have details. For instance, there's a fireplace right here with a chair. You would expect some firewood and maybe an axe, right? You have this table right here. Don't leave the table plain. Put something on the table. Put like a plate, put a map, put some coins, whatever it might be. Here's a plate on top of this washing station here. I put a guitar on top of the bed. That tells a story. Maybe the person who lives here is a bard. I have a bookshelf here, so throw in maybe an open book and some closed books. Throwing in some extra details, that's the stuff that tells the story. So absolutely look at your points of interest on the map, look at the things, look at the areas, and then think about what small details you can add to that. And especially if you want to tell a story, like maybe someone was abducted here, then maybe have some footprints leading away from an area with some blood on it or something. Little details like that are going to tell the story, and that's exactly what you want to do with your battle maps. Well, hey, that's it. This was a super short video. I hope those 10 things are helpful, and I look forward to seeing you all next Wednesday for the new streams. Go ahead, go to our Discord, join up. You'll see that we've uploaded the stream calendar for next month. Lots of fun ones coming up. And hey, don't forget, we also have weekly map prompts. If you join Discord, notice in the event channel, we have these map prompts. These things are extremely helpful if you want to get more creative. So use those prompts, challenge yourself, make something, okay? Hey, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. I will see you all next week. Merry map making and Auf Wiedersehen, my friends.